Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Sam. This is Jonathan. We are on Jonathan's newly created cruise channel on YouTube. And I just wanted to start off with Jonathan. Why don't you introduce yourself and your channel?
Sure. So as Samantha said, my name is Jonathan. The name of my channel is Onboard with Jonathan, which actually came to me. I just got off Holland America Lines Rotterdam literally yesterday, so about not even 24 hours yet. And I was sitting at a beautiful table on the ship with some really nice fellow travelers, and they suggested that I have the channel name as Onboard with Jonathan. So hence the name of the channel on YouTube.
All right, Jonathan, that sounds great. Love the new name. On Board with Jonathan is very catchy. So, Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your channel and the content that you've already been posting here?
Yeah, sure. So my channel was created, I believe, in April of 2022, but I haven't posted anything to the channel except on my last cruise, which just ended yesterday, as I mentioned. So I have about 37 videos up, different areas of the ship. Obviously, we're working on getting a ship tour that I know a lot of you have been asking for, but I was, giving some short videos. I was talking about like Fort Lauderdale area hotels. I was talking about gratuities, tipping the crew during holiday season, and just trying to give the best advice that I can after being on many cruises since cruising since 1999.
Beautiful. So, Jonathan, I'm sure a lot of people are curious just to know a little bit more like about you and who you are. So, let's get into like the nitty-gritty of who Jonathan is. Tell us a little bit about where you were born and raised and where you currently live.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from New York. I grew up in Queens, New York, Bayside area. I lived there for, I would say, I think I moved out when I was 28 or 29, probably 28. And I moved to New Hampshire. I lived in New Hampshire for about a year. I worked at a really grand resort in the northern mountains of New Hampshire. And after, shoveling snow in May and a little bit of June, I said, I don't know. I don't know if I could do this. So I left. It was a great experience. It's my first time living on my own. I moved back to New York and I spent about, I believe, another year or so back in New York. And I worked at a Five Diamond, one of the, I believe at that time, back in 2015, I worked at a Five Diamond hotel in Manhattan in HR. And then from there, my friend presented me an opportunity to kind of own my own business. And me and my friend, a good friend that I had known him probably at the time 8 or 9 years, we always talked about owning a business, but we really didn't know what that business was. He had presented me some crazy ideas. Let's go buy a movie theater and open up a jazz club and have a casual bar and we'll serve light food. And I'm like, we're not buying a movie theater. Let's own like a consulting firm, and we could consult about maybe the hospitality business. I was like, no, we're not doing that. And there was so many other. There was a cleaning business. We were going to own a Mary Maids. We were going to operate a Mary Maids in New Hampshire. And I said, even though cleaning and housekeeping is a near and dear, I enjoy that part of the industry. One day he presented me something about Jonathan, we could talk about cruises all day. And I'm like, continue. I didn't shut him down. He basically said, we have an opportunity where we could basically sell cruises and make money and basically start our own business while operating under a major brand such as Expedia. And when he said that, talk about cruises and maybe go on cruises for a very discounted rate, he had me sold.
Okay. So, with that being said, where are you currently living right now?
I live about 30 miles south of Sarasota, a little town called Northport, Florida. We're near Venice, we're near Sarasota, about an hour away from Fort Myers. So there's a lot of small kind of cities nearby. And if you want to drive about an hour and a half to 2 hours, you could be in Orlando.
Okay. So, a little bit about yourself and hobbies. What do you like to do for fun?
I don't have a lot of hobbies. I would say my hobby is a very expensive hobby that would be going on cruises. Small other hobbies would be I like walking. I do try to have a small fitness routine at night. Obviously, Florida, the weather is getting better, right? in the summertime, I would go out at 8 o'clock at night, which would be the only time where you can actually go out and walk and breathe and not die of the humidity. So like to go on walks. I like to make sure my car is well maintained and cleaned. I love to try new restaurants, but the major hobby is going on cruises, and also I love aviation. So anything commercial aircraft, commercial planes. If it's a chance to go fly somewhere and be on an airplane, I definitely have that is a big hobby of mine. Very expensive though. It could add up quite quickly.
Absolutely, it can. So I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to where I come into this. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit more about like how we met and how we know each other?
Sure. Hopefully, I won't embarrass you. So, me and Samantha used to work for the same company. I met her, I believe it was May of 2021. I was sent from Florida. They asked me, "Would you?" I remember visiting. I was home back in New York, and one of the regionals asked me, "Would you be willing to go to Michigan?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to get out of Florida. It's starting to get hot, and I've actually never been to Michigan." And they said, "Why don't you come up for about 2.5 weeks?" I said, "Yeah, give me the information." And my first day, I believe it was the first or second day I was there at the hotel. We were cleaning rooms, hence why we were kind of tasked with kind of helping out. Task force. You basically do anything and everything to kind of keep the hotel running. Samantha was cleaning the bathroom, and I was maybe, I think, either dusting or making the bed. And Samantha left like literally one piece of paper on the toilet roll, and I said, "You're gonna change that, right? They pay a lot of money here." And she gave me that the dirtiest look. And from that May 2021, we've been good friends. She's moved on to I moved on to another state. She's moved on to another state, and we've always been connected, and we have a good relationship.
That toilet paper, my goodness.
Hmm.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what your career is now? I know we met in hotels. Are you currently still working in hotels?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I'm a general manager of a hotel nearby. It's the only industry I've worked in. I've kind of gone back and forth between operations and HR. So I've done HR generalist, yeah, human resource manager, and kind of gone back into operations, having kind of a strong suit for the back of the house. And now in my current position as GM, when you've been in the industry for a long time and you become a GM, it kind of comes full circle where you really understand the inner workings of a hotel, right? How there's like a pyramid, right? You got to make the owners, the guests, and the employees happy. That kind of all comes together when you see everything. You see everything on that profit and loss statement, but also you want to make sure that the team is healthy and they're engaged and making sure they're taking care of the guests, right? Marriott says, if you take care of the employee, they will take care of the guests, and the business will take care of itself. So I've always that has always been a very big part of my career. I'm a big advocate of taking care of the team and making sure that they have the best work environment we could possibly have.
That's very true. And I'm sure a lot of people from your channel recognize you from a video that you were previously in highlighting your hotel.
Mm.
And although that is a major part of your life, cruises is another major part of your life,
Mhm.
which brings us here to this channel.
Yes.
Um, so why don't you tell us what's always kind of fascinated me is I know you to love cruises. I know you to love travel. Hospitality is obviously within that same, brand of cruising and traveling. Tell me, would you ever work in the cruise industry?
I think it's a tricky question because when I was younger, at the age of maybe 24 or 25, I had several opportunities. I had several contracts to actually work on board a ship, and I feel like I don't want to be negative, but I feel the time of working on a ship at the age that I am, I think that that opportunity has kind of sailed off, and I don't want to ever dislike cruising because it's a big part of my life. So I would say no to maybe the shipboard life, even though it was absolutely my dream to work on a ship and to have that. You have that white uniform and you have those stripes on your shoulder. That's always been a dream of mine. Maybe looking at um, I was speaking to Samantha about telling her, cruises versus, working on the ships versus shoreside. So obviously all the major cruise lines have corporate department that they're usually, depending on the lines, they're either in Miami or Seattle or other areas. That would be maybe something in the future to kind of look at. I don't necessarily know what position would be really that would align with my experience. Obviously, I owned my own travel agency for 5 years, so I had something to do with sales. So cruise lines have a position called the business development manager, where they basically assist local travel agencies and basically selling their product. And they come and they offer assistance. They do trade shows. They come to your local travel agency and do cruise nights, which we did as owners and operators of a local business. So a BDM, as they call it in their terminology of a cruise line, maybe in the future. But when I'm saying this to you, I would also love to wear the uniform, but I get seasick. So maybe in episode 3 of Onboard with Jonathan, we'll talk about maybe remedies to cure seasickness. Can it be actually cured? I have a very good answer for that.
Wonderful. So I guess let's talk a little bit about cruise history. For anybody that is curious, Jonathan has a very long history of cruising. I do not. So I always like to pick his brain on this. And a lot of people have asked these questions in the comment section. So I'm here to get some of your questions answered. First of all, how many cruises have you completed already?
Yeah. So yesterday was, if my log is right, I have a little piece of paper that I have in a safe that I literally just record. I wish I would have a log book, but I'm not flying a plane or driving the ship. So 54 cruises completed yesterday, and I I need a little bit of a reprieve for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then I'm ready. After the laundry's done and you slept in your own bed for 3 or 4 days, I'm ready to go on the next one.
When did you start cruising? How young were you?
Sure. I think I was 14, and my first cruise, which got me addicted to cruising and making me want to own my own business, that cruise was on December 23rd, 1999. I was in ninth grade, and it was on Celebrity Cruises on the Celebrity Century, a ship near and dear to my heart. I fell in love with cruising on this ship. I sailed on the ship, I believe, 5 times. And then, from that cruise and from the memories and from what I remember, I still remember parts of the cruise. So it's 2023. So 24 years later, right? I still have great memories of the cruise. My dad, I always say, when I would talk in my store, my dad took me on the cruise, but I kind of turn it around and I turn it around and say, I took my dad on that cruise, because I remember this very specifically. There was an old fax machine, and Samantha might not remember. She's a little bit younger than me. It had kind of carbon paper, right? So I made the reservation on Celebrity, and they said, "Do you have a fax machine?" And people would talk right now. What do you mean what is a fax machine, right? And they literally sent the itinerary and the price of the cruise, the cabin assignment, and all the information to this fax machine that literally I had to unplug the phone line of my house, right? We didn't have 2 phone lines, so I unplugged the phone. They said, we're going to send it. And I had this piece of paper for maybe 4 years, and that piece of paper, don't know where it is now, is completely blank. So they sent the confirmation through the fax machine for this December 23rd. It was a 7-night Caribbean Christmas cruise. And I always remember, obviously being away during the holiday, but I always remember they gave a gift on I believe, Christmas Eve. It was a silver, clock, and it had the name of the ship and the name of the company, and I think the year. I have it. It's not working. It probably needs a battery, but fond memories of that cruise.
Wow, that's pretty crazy sending confirmations through the fax. The carbon paper, I do remember my grandparents owned a business, so I used to play with it when I would go over to their house.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very funny. That's a very vivid memory. I love that you remember all the details of that, because I don't think I would. Let's talk about your top 5 cruises. What are the top 5 cruises that you've been on? And tell us, the lines that you were on and where they went.
Sure. So yeah, that's an easy one. I obviously don't have this written down, so it's by memory. The first cruise would be we went to Key West, Ocho Rios, Grand Cayman, and Cozumel. Great cruise. That was what you would call a Western Caribbean. I went on a 15-night Panama Canal from Fort Lauderdale. It was Miami to San Diego. that was on Royal Caribbean's Serenade of the Seas. That would be the top two. So we basically did a full transit of the Panama Canal. If you watched any of the videos that I uploaded recently, that was a partial transit of the Panama Canal, but the new locks, right? So take a look at, new locks versus old locks. Continuing on the list would be number three. I did a transatlantic cruise on Cunard Line, and if anyone's familiar with Cunard Line, they have a rich history of sailing for a very long time. And me, and my dad, transatlantic from London, Southampton, where the Titanic left from over 100 years ago, to New York on Queen Mary 2, which is basically it is the only ocean liner left in the world. And I know Samantha and I were talking, I think last week, right before the cruise, or 2 weeks ago, she was trying to understand the differences between a cruise ship and an ocean liner, and she wasn't really understanding. But I'll say the difference between an ocean liner is they're basically making transatlantic crossings across the North Atlantic, and the North Atlantic is very unpredictable in the weathers that they encounter. So the ship is reinforced. The front of the ship is reinforced. I think it's like 40% higher grade steel. So let me tell you, on this cruise, that we don't call it a cruise, we call it a crossing, right? We had some very interesting weather, about 20 to 25-foot seas. If you had a traditional cruise ship sail that, it would be very uncomfortable. For Queen Mary 2, 20, 25-foot seas is nothing for the ship. So that's number three. Number four. Okay, I'm kind of. Oh, my mom took me on the Serenade of the Seas when it was 8 weeks old, and we did a beautiful Canada New England cruise out of New York in August of 2003. We went to Boston, Bar Harbor, Newport, Rhode Island, Halifax, and I believe St. John, New Brunswick in Canada, and then we returned to New York. When I asked the cabin attendant for extra pillows, we wanted some extra pillows. He literally was taking them out of the plastic. The ship had just come from Germany. They had done one or two cruises in Europe, and the ship came over to New York for a Canada New England sailing. And the cabin attendant, he was checking, and he thought that we were the first ones to occupy the room in the 8 weeks that it was in service. So Serenade of the Seas, beautiful ship, part of the good old Radiance class on Royal Caribbean. The Radiance class came out in 2000. The Radiance, the Brilliance, the Serenade, and the Jewel, beautiful ships. And I'll leave to my fifth cruise that I have very fond memories. I was on a very similar itinerary to what I just completed yesterday. I sailed on the Celebrity Constellation. If there's any Celebrity cruise fans, which is my favorite cruise line, Constellation is part of the Millennium class. Millennium, Infinity, Summit, and Constellation, also nicknamed Connie. I sailed on her last December, early December. We did 11-night extended, or ultimate, as Celebrity calls it, ultimate Caribbean cruise out of Tampa. We went to Grand Cayman, Costa Rica. We went to Panama, but did not go to the Panama Canal. We went to Cozumel and Cartagena, Colombia overnight. So obviously, I have a lot of great cruises, but I think those are the top five that stand out for me.
Okay. So why don't you tell me what your worst cruise was? Tell me where the itinerary was and what made it not great.
Oh, wow. I really think it's very hard to kind of say that someone has a bad cruise or the worst cruise, because in my opinion, being at sea, people say, what do you enjoy so much about the cruise? Do they say the entertainment, the cruise, the food? Yeah, all that stuff is important to me, but I just like being on the ocean. But to answer your question, I don't want to give away, I don't want to disparage or give away the line. But it was a major contemporary cruise line with a decent itinerary. It went to Key West, and I won't say the other port, because if I say the name, I'll give away the cruise line, and I don't want to disparage or talk bad about the cruise line. But the ship was very crowded. I don't think the crew or the officers could keep up with the amount of people on the ship. We were sailing full in July, in the summer in Florida, with, I think it was like a week or so before kids went back to school. So there was a lot of kids. I'm not against kids. Kids should enjoy and have a wonderful time. But it was very crowded. The food was average, and it felt very mass market. And did I really pay this amount of money for this? So I look at a cruise how Jonathan looks at a cruise and being a success is, what can I walk away with? What memories can I have that I think about, like, oh my God, I want to go back on that ship and I want to see the crew again. That's how I kind of look away. I look and evaluate, and I know that, hey, that constellation that was 12 over, it was 12 months ago. I wonder if the crew is there, and I would love to go back and see if that experience is the same, because they literally treated me like a king.
Okay, wonderful. So, um, let's just talk a little bit about the brands that you've sailed. I obviously, my eyes have opened up a little bit this year to how many different cruise lines there are. Tell me, which cruise lines have you sailed, and which ones are, I guess, your return places that you go to?
Yeah, so good question. So the cruise line industry is kind of broken up into segments. There's contemporary cruise lines, which would be like Royal, Carnival, or Norwegian. Those are your contemporary. I've sailed on Carnival many years ago. I sailed on Royal, um, Norwegian as well. And then you kind of go up a little bit. Your premium cruise lines are Celebrity, which is 22 cruises completed for me on Celebrity. You have Holland America Line, which is close competition to Celebrity. Two cruises completed on Holland, one just yesterday, and I sailed on the Vietnam in 2008. That ship is no longer with Holland. That was either it was transferred to another cruise line in Europe or scrapped. I don't think it was scrapped, but I'm not 100% sure. And then the last premium line is Princess Cruises. Um, then we have Deluxe. If anyone's familiar with Disney, Disney Cruise Lines has a fleet of, I think they have four ships. I sailed on the Disney Wonder twice. So they have Disney Magic, Disney Wonder, Disney Dream, Disney Fantasy, and Disney Wish. And then you kind of get into your river cruises that sail Europe. You get into your luxury cruise lines, which I unfortunately don't have a lot of experience. I have zero experience with your luxury cruise lines, such as Seabourn, Crystal, Regent Seven Seas, and then I forgot Cunard. Cunard would show with your deluxe cruise lines.
Okay. So, what I'm hearing is that you are a frequent flyer with the Celebrity Cruises. So let's talk about all of the changes. You've been cruising for such a long time and you've been on several ships. Let's talk about all the changes that you've noticed. A lot of people are still discussing how COVID has changed many industries, the cruise industry being one of them. Talk to me about the changes that you've noticed as a traveler and a passenger. What have you noticed that has significantly changed? What have you noticed that has improved?
So having cruised on a mainstream line back in July, usually your cabin is cleaned twice a day, in the morning and at night, like a turn down service. They'll replenish your towels, they'll remove any trash, and sometimes they'll leave you even a chocolate on your pillow, right? They kind of taken that away on the mainstream lines, such as Carnival, Royal, and Norwegian, where they basically come and introduce, the cabin attendant will introduce themselves to you on the first day and basically ask, would you like service in the morning or at night? So that's a, I guess that's a, it's a way that the cruise line can basically position these crew members to do other things, right? Because they're not cleaning your room twice a day. Other things kind of noted on this past cruise on Holland America, the amount of activities on sea days, which would be before the pandemic, would be like 3 pages of things that you could do. This cruise on sea days, we had almost 6 sea days, not in a row, but throughout the itinerary. Very limited amount of activities. So I think they've kind of dialed back housekeeping. They've dialed back the activities. And obviously, a very, very important subject and very people have their own opinions, is the food, right? Food, which is maybe a big reason why someone might go on Celebrity, right? Because they know Celebrity has a reputation for good food. People feels like they've dialed it back a little bit based on, you know, everything has gone up, right? January, I felt like once January came, 2023, everything basically changed, right? I know Celebrity kind of did away with opening the full buffet for dinner because they realized how much went to waste. So instead of having the full buffet open up on the on the Ocean View Cafe, they only did like 2 or 3 islands, and the rest were kind of closed, so they could kind of save and conserve. So those are kind of the small, I don't know. Those are kind of the things that I've kind of noticed on cruising. I feel like a lot of the premium lines, so Celebrity, Holland. I have not been on Princess since COVID. I think people need to realize and have an understanding as the traveler. The cruise line industry didn't sail for 18 months, right? These cruise ships set at idle or in the off the anchorage in Bahamas. They set in Europe, anchored, and the cruise lines lost billions and billions of dollars. So when we kind of talk about what they've taken away, obviously we want the cruise lines to have a healthy bottom line and they need to be sustainable for the future. So I kind of got out of the way, but I hope I answered your question.
That's quite all right. What would you say is like your best advice to cruise lines being a traveler and trying to get the most value for your dollar on
So
cruises?
so training, right? Training is very big in the hospitality industry, especially in hotels. We're required and mandated by the brands that we operate to train our employees, and certain things are mandatory, right? Um, I think I can't speak for all the lines. I can only speak for what I experienced the last 12 nights on the cruise I was on. I feel like the crew works extremely hard. However, I feel like there's a disconnect sometimes with what their common goal is, right? The common goal in the hospitality industry is for someone to basically leave and they want to come back, right? That's the biggest thing for us. A loyal guest is so much harder to replace a loyal guest than for you to get, say 5 new customers than to keep that loyal guest. And I think, you know, the cruise lines had huge problems staffing their ships. And so did the hotel industry. There were ships that sat offline because they couldn't get enough crew. A lot of the crew did not return after the pause in operations. So as again, I'll leave it. The crew works extremely hard. Your cabin attendants, your waiters, your assistant waiters, they work 8 to 9 months, and every single day they work very hard. But I think the cruise lines need to do, I don't know, more training. What can we do if there are service issues, and what do we do to make it right, and to make sure that that customer is satisfied before they walk off that gangway, right? Because you never know, that person maybe would have booked a cruise on board, right? You could book cruises on board, but they're like, the experience was very average, and they're like, I'm going back to the other line that I'm comfortable with and that I've sailed with for the last 20 years. So I think that if I answered your question, that's my advice for the cruise line. A very hard job. I could not work on a ship for 8 months and do the jobs that some of these people do.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great answer. Obviously, everybody is spending quite a bit of hard-earned money
Mm-hmm.
on these cruises, and if you're spending, great money, you also want to have great service that goes along with it. And I think it's very great that your answer truly just goes back to service. It's not that the cruise lines need to invest a lot of money into certain things. It's mostly the service and how you feel during that experience. Because somebody like me who's never cruised before, going from only doing land vacations to if I were to take my first sea vacation, I would really just hope that the service just, knocks it out of the park to where I want to return to cruising versus doing a land vacation. So thank you so much for that.
Gotta
That's
get you on
actually really
get
great.
you on a cruise.
Let's
I gotta recommend you.
yeah, gotta get me on a cruise. Gotta go on a great one. I'm all about the fun, but I really love great food, and I know that's why you really enjoy those vacations. Um, let's talk a little bit more. We discussed in the beginning, and you kind of touched on it. Owning a cruise travel agency. We've discussed your travel agency that you owned, many times. The Expedia Cruises brand was the name of your travel agency or the umbrella that you were under. Tell me a little bit more about why this was the one that interested you. You said that your business partner had thrown out many different ideas, but why did we think that this one would be the best one? Was it just because of your interest in cruises, or was there something that specifically lined up with that
Yeah,
as
well, wow,
well?
that's a lot. That's a lot of questions in one question. Yeah. The opportunity to sit in an office all day and talk about cruises and recommend based on your knowledge, right? You could basically, when someone comes in and you could recommend something because you've been on the ship, you've been on the itinerary, and maybe you could even recommend the cabin that is great for them. That was really rewarding, right? And for people to come in and be like, you guys are much better than booking a cruise on the internet, because if I have a problem, I'm speaking to someone that has no idea what they're talking about, right? And obviously, I'm not promoting Expedia. Expedia is the number one brand in travel, right? If Jonathan put his name on the awning of the business or the door and said Jonathan's Travel, I would not have been as successful as I was. Expedia is a very big player in the industry. Um, and just having the support of, obviously it's a franchise, right? Franchises always
Mhm.
provide, for the most part, a lot of support that you could reach out, and you're given that feedback on how to improve, what you could do better. But having a brick and mortar store where people can kind of come in, and they come in when you're new and they'll be like, or even when you're 3 years old, oh, I didn't know Expedia had a store. And then you kind of have to explain to them, yeah, we're part of Expedia, but we specialize in selling cruises, because cruising is the bread and butter of the business, right? We sold airfare, which obviously is not a big money maker for us, but we sold package deals, you know, um, basically all inclusive resorts. But the cruise industry is where travel companies that specialize in cruises makes their bread and butter, and where they can make a good amount of money to support themselves. And you know if they have multiple stores, even better, they're making even more money.
Okay. So we know that Expedia is a very big name. It might be a little bit different than somebody opening up their own travel agency
Mm-hmm.
independently. But let's just kind of talk a little bit more about this for anybody that is interested in the cruise travel agency business and maybe wondering, should I be an owner or should I try to start off as a travel agent? Let's kind of talk about the cost of starting up this business, since you were underneath such a large umbrella and such a big name. What is the cost of this? You don't have to go into specific numbers, but also, how long does it take for you to kind of see a return on a business like this?
Okay. So I would recommend, if someone's interested in learning about the travel business, especially cruises and selling cruises, as I said, that's where you make your money. Maybe you become an independent contractor with this said company, and you pay, I believe, a menial fee. I believe it was $2.99, right? And the only reason why they charge you the $2.99 is for you basically to be. They want to know that you're going to be involved, right? And you're not just going to sign up, right? And you're not going to do anything with leads. But that $2.99 would basically give you access to training. You learn all about the cruise lines. And then if you live near the store of where this store is operating, you go in for monthly meetings. You get to speak with your franchise owners. If your store has two franchise owners, you get to meet the different BDMs, the business development managers from the cruise lines. And you basically are building your own business, right? Because you're basically a contractor. You're a 1099. You're not an employee, right? You basically decide how much or how little you want to do, right? There's there were sellers that sold $500,000, and there were sellers that sold $1 million to $2 million. Do you think the $2 million seller was going on a lot of cruises and making a lot of money? Absolutely. And do you think that they were paying for it out of their pocket? No, it was the cruises that they booked that got them on those cruises, right? Um, Now switching gears towards the franchise owner. Okay, so you need a considerable amount of money to open a franchise, especially if you're starting from nothing, right? If you're going to own your own business and build out your own store, I would say you need a minimum of about $150,000. This is rough. This is a rough estimate in my head. Things are obviously expensive. A build out of a store can cost a lot of money, but if you find commercial real estate, there is something called build as is or build out. Commercial real estate will they'll give you a significant amount of money back as they pay to make your store what they call a vanilla shell, which basically they put it as a vanilla shell, and then the rest is on you to get it ready. So I think Samantha's last question, hopefully if I remember, is how long until you experience a profit or until you are making money? It all depends, right? Every store is different. The locations in which these stores operate, if they're in Florida versus in the middle of North Dakota, they're very, very different. I would say it would take three. I think the amount that Expedia says is about 3 years. 3 years to kind of break even until the first 2 years are very scary because everything is red. You're losing a lot of money because you put a lot of money in. But I would say by three, and especially the year four, you should be making I wouldn't say tons of money, but it all depends on how much revenue and how much top line revenue you're actually selling. The big things that make money for a travel agency is groups. If you could sell groups, which is basically 8 or more cabins or more on a cruise, you're making a lot of money. And if you could sell premium cruises in suites and above, well, balconies and above and suites, and you're selling luxury cruises for $30,000, you'll have no problem paying your rent, because obviously the biggest thing when you own a brick and mortar store is your rent.
So let's kind of discuss your business. We've discussed previously how you own this prior to COVID, and then COVID came along, and you kind of discussed while talking about ships how they were at a standstill for several months. Tell me, how did COVID affect, the cruise business as an owner of a travel agency?
For me, that was the probably the scariest part of my life. We were literally at the almost at the 5 year mark of the store. So I guess I was blessed with basically like, so cruise lines pay you based when the guest makes the final payment, right? So say today I'm going to go on a cruise in March, right? I'm going to make a final payment in December, and the cruise line is going to pay me the commissions for the cruise, and I have the money, right? When the cruise lines were not sailing for 18 months, right? We never knew that it was going to be 18 months. It was always a pause, right? A pause, a pause, a pause. And then finally it just continued, right? So it was a scary experience, because when you don't have any commissions coming in, you don't have any money to pay any of your operating expenses. You have no money to pay your fixed costs, your rent, which is your biggest thing. So and obviously, a lot of in the beginning onset of COVID, nobody really knew what COVID was going to do. But in the end of the day, people were canceling. But then we kept trying to get passengers to move their cruise, right? So then we would move their cruise, and then the next cruise would cancel. And then we would be like, "Can you do it one more time for us? Can we move it, keep this booking, and keep it on so we could preserve the booking and move?" So we would move it again, and the next cruise would cancel. So we kind of finally got to the point where we needed to see if someone would be able to, we would be able to sell the business, which I remember standing somewhere in Sarasota where they'd be like, "Yeah, you need to basically take off the sign." And they were telling you all these things if the actual store was going to close. And it was very scary and very sad, because we built the business from nothing, brand new store that we built to a, it made a good amount of revenue. Nothing crazy, but it did okay. And then at the last minute, someone made us an offer, an existing franchise owner. She bought the business, and she ran the store she worked out something special. I never knew that there was something as commercial leases for 2 years. They're usually in 5 and 10 year terms or together. So she operated for 2 years and then closed. So that was very sad, because we basically gave the business hoping that she was going to take it through the storm. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. So we'll leave it at there. So the business unfortunately closed, I believe, in maybe June or July of 2021. I don't know the date, but that was a very sad. I think the store closing was it felt even worse than when we had to give it away to somebody. So yeah, as I said, and if anybody ever asks me about owning a business and being the said owner, it was a great learning experience. But when COVID came, it was the scariest part of my life. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know, if we were going to have to declare bankruptcy. All those things kind of came through my head, and I felt really bad for franchise owners. That can you imagine a franchise owner just starting out, right? They signed the lease, they're paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and then COVID happens. And I was so lucky that we had 10 months left of the lease. So in the end of the day, I learned a lot. I learned how to manage a business. I learned about marketing plans, promotions. I learned how to deal with non-employees, 1099 contractors. And when they looked at you, they'd be like, "You're not that old." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not that old." But the experience that I had from cruising, I think set me apart from others who basically maybe had the financial resources where I did not, right? I had the financial resources to start, but I was able to offer a wealth of information to my previous customers.
Well, it sounds like a really great business to go into, and it sounds like you had a really great run until COVID came in and threw a
Mhm.
wrench in everybody's plans, which we've seen that happen in many industries. And unfortunately, the cruise industry was affected for such a long time, and due to so many, very strict restrictions, you you weren't able to really know when you were going to get that back. So you did what was best for you. And, here you are still within the hospitality industry, which is amazing. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about future plans for cruises. What are some cruise goals? What would we like to do over the years since you've been on so many lines? It to me, I'm not knowing how cruises work. It seems like you've had to have done at least everything once, but I know you haven't since we
Mhm.
previously talked about this. Tell me, what are some goals? What would you still like to do as far
Yeah,
as
great
cruises?
question. So I would say 60% of my cruises have been in the Caribbean, so I'm a little Caribbeaned out. But having, being in Florida, a drive port where you could drive to Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, all these ports, right? I like to try South America. I was looking at something in March to do a South America, and I was also looking at doing like a Mediterranean cruise. So those are kind of on the horizon, hopefully for maybe 2024. If I was rich and I had a backyard with money in the grass to go get money, I would love to try a luxury cruise because I feel like you know you have a luxury company cruise line called Crystal Cruises that I'm hearing really wonderful things, but you need a lot of money. And I'm thinking Crystal Cruises is operating the ships like what cruising was back in the day. When people talk about back in the day, they mean like the late 90s and the early 2000s were like the creme de la creme of cruising, right? So Crystal Cruises would be on my horizon. Don't know if this YouTube channel takes off. Maybe YouTube will pay for me to go on Crystal. But Crystal Cruises, we have other luxury lines that, yeah, those are very expensive. So I'll leave it at that: Mediterranean and maybe a South America cruise. And I'd love to do another full Panama Canal transit. So full Panama Canal would be either California to Florida or Florida to California. I'd like to do California to Florida because I did the other way. Nothing beats a full transit in the old locks. I would love to do another full Panama Canal transit.
So I think you kind of missed one, which we've talked about, which actually piqued my interest a little bit. We kind of discussed European cruises. Is that something you're still
Yeah,
interested
so
in the future?
summertime, so our summertime, like June, July, August, maybe a little bit of part of September would be doing, if you go to overseas to Europe and you go like out of Rotterdam and you do a lot of different northern, Eastern Europe. Those are some really interesting ports. I'd love to go on a cruise that would go to like Paris and Italy and Greece would be my all-time goal. That Greece and those itineraries would be featured on a Mediterranean cruise that would leave out of most likely Greece. As I mentioned, I love to fly, but I don't know how I feel about flying for 9 hours. So driving to the port over here is kind of limiting you to the options. But I know getting on a plane and flying to Europe is going to make you see things that you've never seen before.
Wonderful. So, final discussion here. Uh, Plans for this channel. At the beginning of the channel, you discussed how you have recorded a ship tour, which everybody was requesting while you were on the ship, to do a ship tour, which is very difficult and challenging while there are so many people on the ship, but you were able to manage to get a good portion of that. And the team is editing that. We know that is coming next after this interview. Are there any other videos that you plan on doing? Can you kind of give us an idea of what the future looks like for this
So
channel?
I love the channel to feature talks about all things cruising. However, I know that not everyone is you know thinking about maybe going on a cruise, or maybe I don't have a lot of fans that are they might be afraid of going on cruises. Maybe I could talk about tips and tricks of the trade. I love to talk about other travel things, maybe aviation, maybe railroads or trains, things like that. Anything like trains, planes, and automobiles, things like that. Maybe we could kind of make the channel a little bit more eclectic. But I'm looking at putting quick clip up about Rotterdam, not the ship tour, because our editor is working on that, but maybe things, likes, dislikes of the Rotterdam, and kind of get that up maybe before the end of the weekend, so people will have my views of how I felt the trip was. And remember, there's 2,668 passengers on board, and everyone is going to have a different opinion. So these are my opinions only solely. They're not. I'm not paid by the cruise line, so these are my opinions on completing the 54th cruise. So hopefully I'll have that out maybe sometime tomorrow about likes, dislikes, and comments about the Rotterdam, having completed that just yesterday.
Yeah. And Jonathan and I have kind of discussed a couple more interviews that we have planned. Like he said, some of those tips and tricks. We already have some outlines of these interviews coming up. So you'll see more of us together, kind of picking his brain. And, I'm so naive to this. So some of my questions I feel like might line up with a lot of people who have asked questions from his channel. As I said, I have never cruised before. Jonathan has plenty of experience cruising. And even while we're setting these interview guidelines, I am sitting there asking questions, wondering if this is even a good or valid question. And I'm just very curious about it. So a lot of things that I think that viewers will be interested in, because I am interested in it. Every single time we talk, I'm frequently asking some very similar questions or in a different way. So we have some interviews planned in between other content that Jonathan is putting together for this channel. But Jonathan, any final words here?
For people that might view this that have never been on a cruise, and when someone says to me, did you ever see the Titanic? And I kind of get like, I turn green, I turn red, I get upset, because cruising is very safe. The Titanic happened, I think, 110 years ago, and obviously the Titanic was at odds the moment it left England. En route to New York, there were some poor decisions made that led to that unfortunate tragedy. Cruising is very safe. Cruise ships have the latest technology at their fingertips. If you ever have had tours of the navigation bridge, which I've been on the bridge multiple times on cruise ships, they have the latest radar. They know where bad weather is. Will you get bumpy seas sometimes? Yes. Is the ship safe? 100%. Nothing is going to happen. Are there incidents that happen on ships? Yes. They're floating hotels that have engines. So things happen. But I have never, ever been in my 54 cruises, have I ever been concerned for my safety. Cruising is wonderful, right? Cruising is great. And I know me and Samantha were talking just before we launched this, talking about, maybe we'll talk quickly on the next video about seasickness. So you're on board with Jonathan, suffers from seasickness. So maybe people are thinking, oh, this guy's been on 54 cruises, but he gets seasick. So we'll talk about that. But I want to say cruising is very safe. It's a great form of transportation, because if you look at it, cruising is taking you from different places, right? Some people may enjoy, a cruise is a sample of places to take you to, and maybe you do maybe a couple of vacations a year. You go on a cruise, then you go to maybe a land vacation, of places that you've seen along the way that you get more time at, right? Because obviously on a cruise, the time is kind of restricted, right? You basically see places, you get on in the morning and you leave in the afternoon so you can make it to your next port. But cruising is fantastic. Do I miss being on the ship yet? Not yet. But as I said in the beginning, give me 3 or 4 days to do laundry, sleep in my own bed, recharge, and I would be ready to embark on my next cruise as soon as early next week. But unfortunately, I'll be embarking on my my full-time job that actually pays me. So yeah, I'll be going back to work. So yes.
Well, thank you to everybody for sticking through the end of this video. Of course, if you've not already, hit the like button, share this with any of your friends that are interested in cruising, have not cruised before, or cruise frequently. Anybody might enjoy this channel, but of course, hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. So anytime Jonathan posts, you'll get an alert and you can come and watch his videos. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jonathan, for your time today doing this interview. I hope everybody enjoys.